Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the thrilling, microscopic journey of how flowering plants literally sustain almost all life on Earth. It's a story of hidden anatomy, epic migrations, and a pretty wild biological magic trick that scientists call double fertilization. So think about this massive evolutionary problem for a second. Animals can walk, fly, or swim to find a mate, right? But plants? They are completely rooted to the ground. Since they can't exactly move, they had to evolve some of the most ingenious, highly coordinated biological solutions on the planet just to pass on their genes. Here's our biological roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The anatomy of a flower. 2. The pollination journey. 3. The double fertilization mystery. 4. Nourishing the embryo. And 5. From zygote to seed. Let's jump right in. Section 1. Anatomy of a flower. Setting the stage. There's a really clear division of labor going on within the flower. You have the stamen, which is the male reproductive part, consisting of a long filament holding up an anther. Think of the anther as essentially a tiny pollen factory, and waiting as the female receiver is the pistil. The pistil is made up of a sticky landing pad called the stigma, a long stalk called the style, and a bulged base at the bottom called the ovary. Now, deep inside that ovary lies the ovule, and within that, the embryo sac. It's so fascinating because it features this highly specific, almost architectural layout, specifically a 7-celled, 8-nucleated structure. At one end, you have 3 antipodal cells. Right in the middle, there's a massive central cell housing 2 polar nuclei. And at the bottom, 2 synergid cells flanking 1 absolutely crucial egg cell. You're going to want to remember this specific layout because it's the exact key that unlocks the whole double fertilization process later on. Section 2. The pollination journey, an epic quest.
Okay, so plants use wind, water, or animal pollinators like bees and birds to execute one of 3 distinct pollination strategies. They might self-pollinate within the exact same flower, that's called autogamy. They might transfer pollen to a different flower, but, on the same plant, which is known as geitonogamy. Or for the absolute best genetic mixing, they rely on xenogamy, transferring pollen to an entirely different plant. That genetic diversity is the ultimate goal, but the immediate mission is always exactly the same. Get those male pollen grains safely onto the female stigma.
And once that pollen grain lands on the stigma, it doesn't just sit there. It literally germinates. It sprouts this pollen tube that acts as an epic tunnel, actively growing down through the solid tissue of the style. It's actually guided by chemical signals released by those synergid cells we mentioned earlier, straight toward a tiny opening in the ovule called the micropyle. Inside this growing tunnel, 2 male sperm cells are traveling down toward the embryo sac. Section 3, the double fertilization mystery, the climax. So when those 2 sperm cells finally arrive, we get this brilliant 2-for-1 deal. The first sperm fuses with the haploid egg cell to create a diploid zygote. This process is called syngamy, and it creates the actual baby plant. But what about that second sperm? Well, it travels to the middle of the embryo sac and fuses with those 2 polar nuclei. This is called triple fusion, and it creates a triploid primary endosperm cell. In a single stroke, the plant creates the embryo and simultaneously creates a packed lunch, the endosperm, to feed it. It's crazy to think that this elegant, highly coordinated biological ballet was completely hidden from humanity for most of our history. It actually wasn't until the late 1800s that 2 scientists, Sergei Nowoshin in Kiev and Léon Guignard in France, independently observed this process. And amazingly, they managed to discover this complex fertilization using only classical 19th century light microscopes. No way, right? Before we move on, I have to share a really surprising evolutionary anomaly from our sources. We said double fertilization is unique to flowering plants, but there's a wild exception in a group of non-flowering seed plants called gnatals, like ephedra and ganetum. They perform a primitive version of this whole thing. Their 2 sperm cells fuse with 2 separate egg nuclei to produce 2 viable diploid zygotes. However, they don't create that nutrient-rich triploid endosperm. Instead, the female gametophyte has to provide the nutrients, and one of those 2 zygotes simply aborts. It's a really fascinating glimpse into how this process might have convergently evolved. Section 4. Nourishing the embryo, post-fertilization events. Right after the fireworks of double fertilization, that triploid cell we just talked about rapidly divides to become the endosperm, the absolute ultimate food source for the developing zygote. Interestingly,
Endosperm development usually happens right before embryo development, just to ensure the food supply is ready to go. Depending on the species, it develops in one of three ways: nuclear, where nuclei divide freely; cellular, where cell walls form immediately after every division; or heliobule, which is kind of an intermediate type mostly found in monocots. Now let's trace the progression of embryo development, or embryogeny. The zygote divides by mitosis to form a simple proembryo, growing through a globular stage into a distinct heart-shaped embryo. Finally, it becomes a complex, mature dicot embryo, complete with a suspensor, a radicle which will become the root, a plumule which will eventually become the shoot, and two large cotyledons, which are basically the seed leaves. Now, while those early developmental stages are practically identical across different types of flowering plants, their final structures are definitely not. The mature dicot embryo structurally differs quite a bit from the monocot embryo. The dicot has two cotyledons. The monocot, on the other hand, has only one large cotyledon, which is specifically referred to as a scutellum. But despite these differences, both are perfectly designed miniature plants sitting in suspended animation.
Section 5. From zygote to seed, the resolution.
So the ovule, having been fertilized and packed with an embryo and endosperm, matures into a seed. Meanwhile, the surrounding ovary swells and ripens to become a protective and often pretty delicious fruit. These mature seeds are the ultimate survival capsules for plant species. Because pollination and fertilization in seed plants are largely independent of water, seed formation is incredibly dependable. Seeds are packed with a built-in food supply to self-nourish the young seedling until it can perform photosynthesis on its own. They contain fresh genetic variations. And honestly, best of all, they're dehydrated and dormant, meaning they can just wait out there for months or even years to conquer new habitats when the time is exactly right.
I want to leave you with this final thought today. Think about that endosperm we spent so much time discussing. That nutrient-packed tissue doesn't just feed the plant embryo. It feeds us. The starch in corn, the bulk of a grain of wheat or rice, that is all literally endosperm. So, the next time you eat an apple, a slice of bread, or a bowl of rice, remember the epic, microscopic double fertilization journey that made your meal possible in the first place. Which leaves us with a massive question. As climate change alters our environment, can we figure out how to bioengineer this fragile, microscopic dance to secure the future of the world's food supply? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.